Hi, this is Vanessa Garcia from Inductive Automation, and what I'm going to do today is do a brief introduction to Ignition software. I just have a few slides to show you. We'll be going through the architecture, licensing, and the different modules that you can use with Ignition and what they can do. And then also I'm going to load the software live for you so you can get a feeling of what it takes to get started with the software. I'll also show you where to get a database so that you can use that database with Ignition for historical logging, recipe batching, alerting, things like that. Also trending. I'll develop some screens with Ignition. We'll log some data, and then I'll show you some completed demonstration projects so that you can get an idea of the development side of Ignition and also the types of projects that you can create. So that being said, we'll get started here. So Inductive Automation started in 2003. We are the pioneers in the database-centric web-launched HMI and SCADA arena. The software has been proven popular and successful in many different industries, and I've listed a few here. Currently, the software is being used in 54 different countries, and we have about 445 system integrators in our program that resell and support our software around the world. So Ignition is an industrial application server. The whole thing is web managed. The platform, the clients are and designer are what we call web launch. So that looks a little bit different than what you've seen with other systems. We use a technology called Java Web Start, which means that our clients and designers actually launch from a web page, but they're not running in a web page. They'll look like any other application on your computer, just like Outlook or Photoshop or whatever. They look like full rich applications, and I'll demonstrate that in a bit. Ignition is modular in nature, and you can use those modules to accomplish a variety of different things. So you can use what we call the Vision module, is pure HMI functionality where you just have some real-time status and control screens, and you can launch those on the company network. All the way up to full SCADA functionality. You can use a piece called the SQL Bridge of Ignition, just purely as a data logger, and you can log from any device, any PLC, any OPC server on the market to any SQL database. So that means that we do have built-in drivers for MySQL, SQL Server, Oracle, Postgres, IBM's DB2, and any other SQL database on the market. You can also use it as a business application with a SQL database backend. So that's basically like using Ignition for your web launched clients and creating all of your database screens as a user interface, but with that SQL database in the back. You can also use it for recipe and batch management functionality. So practically anything you can imagine. And this last line here is pretty cheesy, but it's really because of the binding architecture behind the components of Ignition that make it so flexible. You can bind a component to real-time status in the PLC. You can bind it to something in the database. You can bind it to an expression, to a SQL query. So there's lots of things that you can do behind the scenes and present that information on the screen any way you'd like. The way we license Ignition makes it very special because we only license per server, which means that all the web launch clients on that are networked to that server are free, and you can launch unlimited amounts. So we don't have any like user licensing. We don't license per user. Also, you can have concurrent web launch designers. You can have as many data points as you want, unlimited database connections to SQL databases, unlimited screens, projects, so it's completely scalable. We also have a built-in OPC UA server and free drivers, so you can choose to use ours, or you can choose to use another OPC server and other drivers, any of your choice. But the ones that we have included currently are Allen Bradley, Modbus, and Siemens. And then we have more drivers on the way, but those are the ones that are included and free with the system. Our system is the only one in the world right now that is a fully matured cross-platform system. So that means you can run both the clients and the server on any flavor of Windows 2000 and above, either 32 or 64-bit. You can even run them on Linux or a Mac. So this is just the standard architecture here. Basically, you would load Ignition on what we call the server, and we use the term server loosely. As I mentioned, this could be any operating system. It could be as small as a laptop all the way up to a high-performance server. From that server, you'll make a connection to the OPC server, which has a connection to the PLCs on the network, and I'll demonstrate this also. And then also you can connect to your databases. And this gives you, the ability to do trending and work with historical data and things like that. And then you have your web launch clients. You can open these as a touch screen, on a desktop, on a laptop. You can even open these on a mobile device. So if you have an iPhone, Droid, any of the new tablets, you'll be able to launch clients on those as well. This architecture is used a lot in oil and gas, water and wastewater. It may or may not suit what you need, but just as an example, just wanted to show you that the different modules of Ignition, you can load them on different machines and to accomplish a variety of different things. Like for example, in this architecture, you have a central server, so you have your Ignition gateway here, and then you also have a smaller piece of software out in the remote locations called the SQL Bridge. It's not necessary, but what it does is it allows you to use a feature called Store and Forward. Store and Forward means that if this connection should break right here, Ignition will continue to cache the data. So it'll store the data from these PLCs out here, cache it, and then when the connection comes back up, it'll forward it over the network to the main central server. So it'll get all the timestamps and everything correctly, so it won't look like you're missing any data. So that's what we call the reliable remote data logging architecture. So that's all I had for slides, and then I'll actually install the software and go through some other things. But I also wanted to mention that you can set up Ignition to be fault tolerant. So you can set up two servers. One server can be the master, the second one can be the slave. So that way if you have a mission critical project and the master computer or server breaks down for some reason, the slave will pick up, and so there aren't any blips as far as the clients are concerned. Also, we have support for Active Directory. So we use role-based security, so you have some options. You can either get support for Active Directory, or you can get your usernames and passwords from a database, or just using the internal system of Ignition. So you have some options there for authentication. Although we do have an OPC UA server and client, you are also welcome to use Ignition with the older forms of OPC, which is the OPC DA servers. So this DA uses DCOM, which is a Microsoft technology. Microsoft has abandoned this technology, but there's still a lot of these OPC DA servers on the market, and we will still work with those. Also, you can have what's called an Open Driver API. So if you're so inclined, we actually open up our OPC UA server so that somebody can actually write a driver for that and use the OPC server for themselves. We also have a reporting module which produces dynamic PDF reports, so that's similar to Crystal Reports. And with this module, you get unlimited reports. The whole entire gateway backs up to one single file, and that comes in pretty handy for maintenance. So that's about it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my browser and then install the software live for you. So I just have my browser here. I'm on Firefox, but you could use Firefox, Internet Explorer, Chrome, Safari, whatever you want. So you just go to our website, which is inductiveautomation.com. And then once you're there, you can read about all the different modules and solutions. But you can also go to here to downloads and then Ignition, and you can actually download a free trial of the software. So you'd fill out this form, but I'm just going to skip it if you don't mind. And then once you're here, you can go ahead and download the installer. So I'm on a Windows 7 machine, so I'm going to use Ignition 7.2.5 Windows installer. But if you're on another operating system, you just scroll down and you'll see the installers for a Linux system or like a Mac. So you have your other operating system options down there. But I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And what it's installing is actually called the Ignition Gateway. So the Ignition Gateway is really the heart of Ignition. It's where you're going to go to make your connections to your devices, if you want to connect to other OPC servers, if you want to connect to your databases and so forth. That would be all done in the Ignition Gateway. The other thing that you're going to want to have is a database. So on my computer, I actually have MySQL. And it's a free database, and I'll just show you where you get it, because Inductive Automation doesn't actually supply the database. You're welcome to use whatever SQL database you want, but I just wanted to show you a very popular one here called MySQL. So what I have downloaded is the MySQL Community Server. So you would download that, and then it's useful to have the MySQL Workbench. So you would get two of those, or you know, that one and that one, and then you would, when you have your workbench, it looks like this. And I have one database in here that's already made for me, and it's just a sample database. But what I'll do is I'll just make a brand new database with no tables in it, and then I'll just have Ignition do the rest of the work. So I'm going to call this database test. Okay, so that's my demo database with tables in it, and then this is my empty database called test. So this should be done downloading pretty soon, a few seconds here. Okay, so once it's done, then I'm going to go ahead and run the installer here, and it'll just kind of take me through the motions. Okay, hit next, accept the agreement. So once this installs, it's going to automatically load itself at port 8088, which is just a default Ignition port. If you want to move it to another port, you're more than welcome to. It's just by default, that's where it's going to go. Okay, so it automatically opens this page, and so this is the address of Ignition now. So if I were on another computer on my network, I would just open up any browser, and then I would type in the IP address or name of the computer that Ignition is loaded on, followed by 8088, and I would be able to get to this gateway from anywhere on the network. Once you're here, you're just going to follow along. So step 1 is to get in the configuration section, so you're just going to use admin and password as a username and password. And then this is where you can look at all of your licensing, backup, restore your system, your user manuals in here. We don't have any projects yet. These are all the modules that are running in trial mode. So your Allen Bradley drivers, the mobile Modbus drivers, OPC server. This is for connecting to OPC DA servers. There's your reporting, SQL Bridge, UDP and TCP drivers, and your Vision module. So all of this is running in trial mode for you to play around with. So we're going to go back home here, and the next thing I'm going to do is connect to a device.